With all the movement, 6 transfers out, 4 transfers in, is the Tar Heels roster ready to be better next season?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, April 26th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me as he does every single stinking Wednesday is our guy, Coach Pack Kilby, and we both want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch every single day, especially those of you that join us every day. For a couple weeks now, we've been calling you the Everydayers. And so Everydayers, what's up? If you're not an Everydayer, come join us. The water's fine. So, Pack, coming up on the show today, we want to talk about the scope of this roster. Is it improved from last season? The Elliot Cadeau conversation still continues on. We're going to talk about that some. We're going to talk even more about what to do with these final 2 scholarships. But first, here's how I want to kind of shape the framework of this first conversation. Pack, let's both answer this question. Are we buying or selling that at this point, the 2023-24 Tar Heels roster will be improved from 2022-23? You go first.
I'm buying. To me, just when you look at what we're losing and what we're replacing it with, I think we've got a good mixture of things that we needed. And I'll give Coach Davis, the staff, credit for that. We needed shooting. I think we went and got shooting. Wojcik can shoot. Ingram is a capable shooter, especially catch and shoot. I believe he's 41% catch and shoot 3.
Which is what he will probably be doing more of with talent around him, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Which, by the way, quick plug coming up on tomorrow's show, we're going to have a conversation with a high school coach who coached against Harrison Ingram all 4 years of his high school. Make sure you check that show out. Keep going, Pack.
And then Cormac Ryan obviously is a good 3-point shooter. So we added the shooting that we needed. We added a 2 and a 3 that we desperately needed. And to be honest with you, Caleb Love is a great player. I think we upgraded in 2 things that are important to me: shooting and unselfishness. Ball movement. And honestly, let me actually rephrase that. Let me put that under high IQ. Just because I think these guys are part of it is unselfishness, but they just tend to make the right play. And I know that they don't come from the best college teams, Stanford and Notre Dame. They weren't great. But them individually, I think they're going to make us better. Especially, like you mentioned, you surround them with R.J. Davis. You surround them with Armando Bacot. I think that makes a huge difference for them. And so, to me, I'm just buying that we got better, especially offensively. And then you look at the defense. I think Cormac, Harrison, those guys, Jae'lyn Withers, those guys are able to guard multiple positions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I never felt like we really had that last year.
Yeah. And
now I feel like we do. I still feel like we lack a little depth between the 4 and the 5 spot.
Yep.
Until proven otherwise. But to me, I think overall we're going to be a better team. What about you?
It's an interesting question for me. I mean, let me answer it by saying I'm buying it. What's interesting about the word improved is that you have to define what we mean by that. Do we mean we've improved the overall talent? Do we mean we've improved the overall way the pieces fit together into the right roles? Because I think the thing people might look at and say is, if I compared each of these transfers to Caleb Love, he's probably a more talented player, comparing each one of them to Caleb Love. I don't think that would be true about everyone that transferred out, but I think that's where people are looking at, because specifically he's the biggest player out. But when I look at the collective whole of what I think this team will be, almost exactly what you just said, how they'll play together, how they will get back above 50% in assist percentage, that is what Harrison Ingram does. He is an unselfish basketball player, a phenomenal distributor, and those kind of things. And so when I look at fit and Pack, I know you talk so much about role definition and that the importance of that for a team's success. Yes, we might have lost one of the top 3 most talented players on last 3 years' team being Caleb Love. But I think the sum of the parts that have come in are going to fit what Carolina needs. And that is what Coach Davis and the staff have been evaluating all this time to try to figure out, what do we have to get to make us a better team? Not necessarily overall more talent, but a better team. And so for that reason, I am buying that the roster has improved as a roster. And as you said, you look at the 4 transfers and the overall success or lack thereof of their teams last year. Obviously, we know Louisville was just straight terrible. 4-28, 2-18 in the ACC, dead last in the ACC standings. Notre Dame, where Cormac Ryan's coming from, 11-21 overall, 3-17 in the ACC. The only team worse than them was Louisville. Stanford, 14-19, 7-13 in the Pac-12. They were 10th out of 12 teams in that conference. The only transfer that's coming in from a team that was a winning team last year is Paxson Wojcik. And that's all. Brown was only 14-13. They were 7-7 in the Ivy League, and they were finished tied for 4th out of 8 teams. And so in terms of pedigree of winning basketball last year, none of these transfers did that. So that is a little bit of for me, a little bit of a pause. But again, I'm willing to say that overall, the sum of these parts collectively come together for the common good, and this becomes a better basketball team. So, Pack, with that in mind, let me ask you an over-under question. Last year, Carolina won 20 games. The year before that, when they made the national championship, they won 29 games. So let's split the difference. Over or under Carolina at 25 wins this coming season?
Before I answer that, I just want to provide one point of hope.
Okay.
The transfers, you just were talking about, didn't come from the most successful schools. Neither did Brady Manek. So there's some hope.
There you go.
When he got to Carolina, he said, I just want to play in the second round, or I just want to make it to the Sweet 16. And obviously they went on a crazy run, so he got to do that. But I'm just saying he was a great player, a great example of not coming from the best team, but being a good fit and thriving. So that's kind of what we need to be hoping for with these guys.
Good. So go ahead. Sorry.
Back to your original question.
Yeah.
25 is the number, right?
That's what I'm setting it at. Over or under?
Woo. I'm going to go over. There's something I didn't touch on earlier when I was talking about buying or selling. I like our depth. I didn't really touch on that, but, now we have Simeon Wilcher. We have Seth Trimble. We have DeMarco Dunn. Depending on what we do with the 4, potentially Jalen Washington or Jae'lyn Withers, Paxson Wojcik. Those are all guys that there's a wide variety of things there, but there's experience. There's 5-star talent in Simeon Wilcher. There's Paxson Wojcik, who arguably is the least talented of all those, who averaged 14 points per game last year at the Division I level. So I think we got better in our starting 5 just by the way the pieces fit and the way this team comes together. But now we have some depth, too, that I think Coach Davis can trust. And, I know those are big words. I think he can trust them. And honestly, to be frank, at this point, I think he has to, because this is now his team. And there's no more, I don't know, these are Roy Williams guys. No, this is Hubert Davis's team. We're year 3, and we've got to start using our depth. And I think we do. And I think we get to that 26-win mark. What are you taking?
I'm also going over. And part of that is I know Carolina only won 20 games this year, but as we've talked about, a healthy Armando Bacot, give me 3 more just from that alone. You talk about if you get those 3 games, you make the NCAA tournament, and so, you know, probably a win or 2 there. So yeah, I'm not going to go, like, if you gave me 30, I'd probably go under. And so I'm going to go between 25 or between 26 and 30 since I'm taking the over. But I do think they get over 25. I think this team will be mature enough, will be unselfish enough, as you talked about, and will have enough of the right people in the right positions and enough depth that, as you said, Coach Davis has to use this year, or else he will have labeled himself as a bench non-truster for his career as a coach. By the way, folks, we want to know your thoughts on these 2 questions we answered. Are you buying or selling that this year's roster will be improved from last year? And would you go over or under on 25 wins for this team? Would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on that. Well, Pat, we've talked, and everyone's talked so much about Elliot Cadeau. You just laid out some of the depth. What would happen if Elliot Cadeau reclassified and came in? Given what Carolina already has and has already brought in, does it make sense? We're going to try to answer that question in just a second. But before we do so, I need to tell you that this episode is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. You're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and calories? Well, then you got to try the best tasting protein bar out there, Built. If you're like me and you're trying to find some healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, well, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs, which are healthy and taste amazing. And it tastes so amazing, in fact, that you won't even think it's good for you. But why is it so good? Well, to start with, it's covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and it comes in all these incredible flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and things like cookies and cream. And all the while, Built's able to maintain incredible macros, just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and yet 17 grams of protein. Perhaps best of all, you don't have to wait around for a box to be delivered to you from Built.com anymore. Checking all those tracking data. No, you can head right on down to Sam's Club or Walmart, get yourself a 4-pack box of cookies and cream at Walmart, get one of those bulk orders of churro at Sam's Club, because you know that's good, and you can bring it right home. Go get some Built Bar. You can thank me later when you try Built Bar, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Folks, Locked On NFL's mock draft special is here, and it's bigger than ever. Follow along with all 32 teams' first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience that only we at Locked On can deliver. All episodes available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or anywhere else you get podcasts. Okay, Pat, the next question is this. If Elliot Cadeau reclassifies, what would it mean for this team? What would things look like if he comes? As a reminder, and we're going to talk about the 2 remaining scholarships in a minute, but Carolina has utilized 11 of their 13. 6 of those right now, I am classifying as backcourt players, as 1s or 2s. And to be specific with it, that would be RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, DeMarco Dunn as returners, and then Simeon Wilcher, Cormac Ryan, and Paxson Wojcik as newcomers. So, Pat, you texted me this to ask this question, and so I want to pose it to you. As talented as Elliot Cadeau is, what does it do to the shape of this roster if Carolina and the Cadeau family decide for Elliot to reclassify and come as part of the class of 23?
Well, it does a lot of things. So, to me, and let's be perfectly clear, Elliot Cadeau is phenomenal. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. This young man is fantastic.
Sure.
The fit for this team seems to me to be a little bit off or odd, just in this sense. So hear me out. If Elliot Cadeau reclassifies, one thing I can guarantee you, 100%, he's not reclassifying to come off the bench.
Nope.
It's not happening. So then you start looking at the way the lineup shapes out. Okay, so Cadeau, RJ Davis, that's 6'1", 6'1", 6'2", 6'1". Then Cormac Ryan, which is what, 6'5"?
I believe he's 6'5", if I remember correctly.
Harrison Ingram, which is 6'7".
Yep.
And then Bacot. That's not that I'm totally against that, okay, because, all last season I kind of posed the 3-guard lineup. I'm not against that at all, but in the current scheme that we have, that's an odd fit, and a small lineup.
Small.
And I'm fine with being small if we adjust our style of play to fit what's on the court. So to me, those are just question marks that I have. I think Cadeau would be instantly the best guard we have outside of RJ Davis. Instant.
In terms of being like a distributing guard, is that what you mean?
Just that, and overall, I don't think there's anyone else. I mean, look, if Cadeau comes, we get him for a year and he goes pro, and he's probably a lottery pick, in my opinion. I really believe he's that good.
Yeah.
So to me, he's the best distributor. I think he's the type of guy that could score more, a lot more, but chooses not to. He creates for his teammates so well that he relies on that, and that's great. But he, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that he can do a lot of things, but what we see is that he's a distributor. But what I see is the second best guard on our team if he comes. And so there's no doubt to me that he can help, but we would have to adjust things to fit that. And then, like you mentioned, we have 7 guards on our roster with the addition of Cadeau. So what does that mean, for if we stay with the same scheme for depth purposes? There's not that many minutes to go around. So it concerns me in the sense that there could be a couple unhappy players, which could ruin team chemistry. And there's just a lot to think about there that I think there's more to it than meets the eye. We see Cadeau, we see talent, and we go, "Ooh, bring him now." But I would say, just to err on the side of caution, we need to show some patience. And I think that he's better suited for us in 24, 25. Don't kill me for that. That's just what I think. So
no, I've come to that decision as well, just based on what Carolina has brought in the portal. Like, I don't think Paxson Wojcik will have as much time as Cormac Ryan of the 2 guards that came in, although Carolina's going to need him to make shots this season. But as you said, if Cadeau comes, if Carolina keeps that same scheme, it's no good, because as you talked about earlier, it's a more depleted front court and a more talent-rich backcourt and a more personnel-rich backcourt in terms of just sheer numbers. And so maybe bringing in Cadeau does signal, hey, we're going to roll out 3 or 4 guards at one time, and maybe we're starting Cadeau and RJ and Simeon or or Cormac or whatever it is, with Harrison Ingram as a small ball 4, being that distributor, and then everyone clearing out space around Armando. But even still, I feel like that's just so much, too many guys. And there's nothing wrong with delaying a year to where, because we know that Paxson Wojcik and Cormac Ryan only have 1 year. And who knows what will happen with RJ using or not using that 5th year. It would seem to make sense to me right now. And it was about this time last year where you started saying, Pac, that Armando would come back for his 5th year. And my friend, you were spot on from the get-go. But it just, I'm with you. I think it creates too many question marks and would not be the right thing for team chemistry at this point. And it seems like, given everything that Elliot himself has said, he's going to be great with that. Because you look at it, it's like, oh, I wait a year and I just come in with Ian, who's blowing up right now, with Drake, who's taken dramatic jumps in his ability over the past months, and James Brown, and maybe Jarin Stevenson as well. Although, as we talked about on yesterday's show, maybe Jarin Stevenson reclasses and comes. Who even knows at this point? And so I'm with you. We're together on this. At this point, we both believe that Elliot Cadeau should not reclass and should stay in 24. Obviously, though, it don't matter what we think. It only matters what what Elliot and his family think and what the Carolina coaching staff thinks would be best for this team. Pack, we're going to wait and see how that all plays out. One of the reasons Elliot Cadeau could come is because Carolina, as we've already said, still has 2 scholarships available. We want to finish the show today by talking about how Carolina should utilize or not utilize those scholarships. I've talked about it some, but Pack hasn't yet had a chance to do so on the show. Also, we want to give Pack the opportunity to give you his starting 5 and look at what Carolina might still need to do. We'll talk about that and have that conversation in just a second. Okay, Pack, I want to talk about these 2 scholarships, but to help us lead into that conversation, I want to get your starting 5 on record. Let's hear it.
This was tough. I debated this a lot, but here's what I'm going with. And I think it is pretty standard, matches most everybody. RJ Davis at the 1, Cormac Ryan as the starting 2, Harrison Ingram at the 3. As of now, this is just gut instinct. I'll take Jae'lyn Withers at the 4.
Yep, that's all we can do is what we know right now.
And Armando Bacot at the 5. But where I struggled, where I debated heavily, was Simeon Wilcher potentially at the 2. The only reason that I swapped those 2 and started Cormac was because of Cormac's shooting ability. And I'm not saying that Simeon can't shoot. I'm just saying I need to see that at the college level. I need to see it. He needs to prove that to me before I could make that switch. But I do think that Simeon, you could argue Simeon's better in other categories, but shooting is just so heavily what we need right now that Cormac gets that priority early. So that's why I went that route.
I think that's all very well said. And hilariously enough, is literally the exact same way I laid mine out. That exact same starting 5, and then gave the caveat that depending on what Simeon does, he might force the coaching staff's hand to start him at the 2, but ultimately gave the nod to Cormac because of his proven experience at the D1 high major level. So, Pack, with that in mind, and then given the depth conversation we've already had, so 6 guards right now: RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, DeMarco Dunn, Simeon Wilcher, Cormac Ryan, Paxson Wojcik. You've got those 6, and then you've got 5 combined between the wing and front court players with Harrison Ingram, Zayden High, and you've got, Jae'lyn Withers, Jalen Washington, and Armando Bacot. So that's your 11 right now. Given that personnel that's already on the roster, given Coach Davis's track record of not playing much depth, Pack, to you, what would be the ideal utilization of these final 2 scholarships?
Well, I think it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier. The backcourt is essentially full, in my mind.
Yep.
Obviously, like we talked about, Cadeau's a possibility. That stretches those numbers way out and makes minutes to make everyone happy almost impossible. But so I think we need to avoid that. And hear me out here. I think it's important to understand when you look at all of this, and I can say this from a coach's perspective too, team chemistry, the guys in your locker room, the guys you're going to be going to bat with every day, that's really important. And what I think the staff has done here, and I don't know this for sure, this is just kind of a gut instinct plus a little bit of what I know. I think they're relying heavily on RJ Davis and Armando Bacot to communicate to them their thoughts and feelings on players and on team chemistry and those things. I know Roy Williams used to do a lot of that too. If a kid came on a visit and they were like, I don't know about this guy, then Roy would stop recruiting them. So I think the point I'm trying to make is chemistry is a big deal. And we've got to be very careful about who we add or who we don't add. And so to me, I think we need to look one spot. We need to look at a 4/5. And, to me, this is just my thoughts and my opinions, but Jalen Washington is a 5. And I know that's kind of different than what most people think, especially because Hubert has said that he's a really good shooting big man. But to me, he can fulfill that same shooting role as the 5.
Yeah.
It fits him better defensively. It fits him better with his length.
That's right.
It fits him better with his foot speed. He's a 5 in my mind. Yeah. And I'm fine with that. Let's rock with that. So that gives us Bacot. That gives us Washington. Where I would like to see us go is for a 4, maybe someone that's proven, someone that's solidified as a stretch 4 that can pick and pop, that can guard multiple positions. And that gives Withers the ability to kind of bounce back and forth between that 3 and 4, which is honestly kind of what we need. You know, Harrison Ingram needs
that's right
a backup. And I know he's got some of that in Cormac Ryan. But
even maybe Dunn could play some 3.
True, yeah. And so maybe we free Withers up to do that little bit of 3 and 4, and then we have somebody that's solidified as the 4. And with that, we definitely have somebody that can back up Bacot in Jae'lyn Washington. And then, so that would leave one scholarship left if we were to pursue a 4 and get a 4. Like Bacot, reclassify Jarin Stevenson, something of that nature. Now, this is where I'm afraid people are going to get upset with me, but that's fine. I think don't even touch the last scholarship. Give it to a walk-on that's been working his tail off. Because what you don't want to do is get into a situation where, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, you've got too many players and not enough minutes to go around. People start to get unhappy. You start to get cancers in your locker room. Your team starts to be divided. You've got a 3-game road stretch in the ACC. You're not getting along. You know, I mean, It's kind of the same old story we saw last year, right? And I'm not saying they didn't get along. It just seemed like there was a lack of chemistry. Yeah. And we want to avoid that at all costs. So that's my 2 cents on the situation.
That's exactly where I have come down. To answer this question, I posed to myself what feels like the biggest hole or the weakest spot on the roster. And to me, it's the 4, because I'm with you. I think we've already, like I had said for a while this offseason, I think we need a backup 5. I'm with you. That's Jae'lyn Washington to me. I would rather see that than Jalen starting at the 4. Everything you said, I'll just leave it there. I think Jae'lyn Withers will and can be a very capable starting 4. But the 2 guys you just mentioned, Jarin Stevenson reclassifying and coming, or McKenzie and Bacot, give me one of those 2 dudes. If you can't get somebody that is a bona fide, like already has collegiate experience, as you said. And so that's what I'm looking at. And especially because it does feel in some ways like we're pretty thin at the 3, because it is Harrison Ingram, who I think is going to, because of that and because of what he does, I think is going to play a lot of minutes. Like I'm thinking 34, 35 a game will be his average. But he's got to be able to be spelled, and you need people that can step in at the 4 so that, as you said, Withers can come down to the 3, or one of those other bigger guards could come up to the 3 and play a small ball lineup. And when you got 6 guards, you're going to have to do that some. And so, Pac, I'm right with you on that. Let's not waste time getting guys on the end of the bench frustrated because of a lack of playing time. You just got to do it this way. And keep in mind, Pac folks talked about giving it to a walk-on. A scholarship is just a 1-year commitment. Like it's not saying, okay, we're going to give this walk-on a scholarship the rest of his time. So don't be afraid that gums up a scholarship for the next year. Just keep that in mind. The only other thing, and I've said this on the show either earlier this week or late last week, is if there's somebody like a Brady Dunlap that you want to draft and stash, where he comes in and you just very specifically say, hey, listen, buddy, we're essentially redshirting you this year, or maybe you actually redshirt him. And yes, he's a great shooter, but it's just, hey, you need to understand that you're probably not going to get much playing time, but we want to go ahead and have you on our squad. If he can get on board with that, I'm fine with doing a draft and stash. Otherwise, you don't touch it, as you said. That's my thoughts. Folks, very interesting conversation all surrounding the roster right now. It's going to continue to be in flux. We're going to have to keep our eyes on these 2 remaining scholarships. what's happening, what on earth KJ Smith meant with his tweet earlier in the week, and we'll keep following all these things. But for now, that's it for this episode of Locked on Tar Heels. Coming up tomorrow, as we said, I know you everydayers are interested in what's next. We will be talking all about Harrison Ingram from a coach who coached against him in high school, who has seen him up close and personal. Please, if you would, go leave a review of the show. 5 stars, good comments on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. Follow the man Pack at Coach_K23. Follow me at Isaac Schade. Email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Please don't forget, subscribe, smash the like button. Would love some comments on today's show. Really interesting questions we talked about. We'll get right back at it tomorrow, but right now I want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. And until then, when we talk again, peace.